The morning Karen tried to kick me off my own dock began like any other. Calm water, sun sparkling on the lake, and me with a cup of coffee watching the surface wink. The storm that day didn't come from clouds. It came in the person of the HOA president. Karen swept down wearing an enormous sun hat, a thick folder of violation notices clutched under her arm, barking orders as if she owned the shoreline. She shoved a paper at me and yelled that I had 24 hours to remove my dock or face steep fines. My dock, the one I built with my own two hands. What she didn't know, which made me smile through her rant, was that in less than an hour the balance of power would change. The woman threatening to take my peace would soon see her most cherished thing vanish before her. Because while she tried to take my dock, I was about to take her boat. My name is Jack. I'm 58, semi-retired, and for the first time in decades, I thought I'd found some peace. After 35 years in construction, saving everything I could, and raising two kids who are grown and gone, I bought a house on the lake for myself. It wasn't the fanciest place on the shore, but it was mine. Every nail, every board, every inch of that dock had my sweat in it. To me, the dock wasn't just planks over water. It meant freedom. It was where I cast my line at dawn, sipped coffee in the fog, and taught my grandkids to tie knots and skip stones. If life had a front porch, that dock was mine. I pictured neighbors as the cherry on top. A small, picturesque community around a clear lake where folks waved as they passed, and you could borrow a wrench without thinking twice. But I didn't count on the HOA, or more precisely, Karen. Karen wasn't someone you could ignore. Picture a woman in her mid-40s, always overdressed for a lakeside stroll, strutting with a clipboard like it was her scepter. She crowned herself queen of the HOA and carried that title with more arrogance than any mayor I'd known. Her lipstick was as loud as her opinions, and her voice carried across the water like a megaphone. Paint your mailbox the wrong white, and Karen would know. A violation letter would appear before the paint even dried. Her house, the biggest on the block, screamed wealth. That sterile, magazine-perfect place nobody really enjoys living in. Out front sat her pride, a polished, oversized boat that looked like it belonged in Miami, not our small lake. She babed it like a crown jewel, parading it every weekend and always parking a hair too close to my dock. At night, I could sometimes hear the faint bump of fiberglass on my boards, like the boat was picking fights in her stead. Before Karen targeted me, life at the lake was peaceful. I had friends next door, old Bob who loved to grill, the Martins who brought pies now and then. We'd chat about fishing holes, water levels, and the weather. Nobody fussed about a grass blade an inch too long. Nobody, that is, except Karen. Why I became a target came down to one thing: independence. Karen hated people who didn't bow to her. She loved being in control, and I wasn't the sort to seek her approval for every little thing. When I built my dock, I followed the rules. County permits, state regulations, measurements checked twice, inspector sign-off. But to Karen, none of that mattered. If it hadn't been rubber-stamped by her, it was, in her eyes, a breach of community standards. I could see it the first time she mentioned it. That blend of contempt and challenge, like she'd found a new hobby. Not filling potholes, not tending the park, not fixing her own violations, but ruining me. Here's the truth. I've worked on sites tougher than any HOA meeting. I've handled clients who stiffed me, bosses who barked until their throats gave out, and inspectors who obsessed over fractions of an inch. Compared to all that, Karen was just another loudmouth with too much time on her hands. Her mistake was underestimating me. She saw a gray-haired man enjoying his dock and assumed I'd fold when she barked. But I've stood my ground my whole life, and I wasn't about to let her or anyone else take away what I built. To me, the lake wasn't merely water. It was peace, a hard-won reward after decades of sweat. Every evening I'd sit on the dock's edge, legs swinging above the water, listening to frogs and crickets. Sometimes my grandson would be there, asking about fishing knots or why the sunset made the lake turn gold. Often it was just me and the stillness. That dock was my sanctuary. So Karen's attack struck deeper than some complaint about wooden nails. She was threatening my peace. Most neighbors didn't really like Karen. They nod politely, sure, but I could read the rolled eyes when she left and hear the murmured gripes about her endless notices. Folks avoided her, paid fines, trimmed hedges, and kept quiet, easier than taking her on. She fed off fear, and to be fair, she had a sharp tongue and an uncanny knack for manipulation. But I'm not wired to be quiet. I sensed this was headed to a showdown. She was picking the wrong fight and didn't even realize it. Bullies are the same at any age. Kids stealing lunch money, foremen shouting on job sites, or HOA presidents with their stack of violation slips. They all live off control, and they all crack when someone refuses to bend. Karen thought she had the power. Her boat, her title, her clipboard made her untouchable. The truth was she stood on rotten planks. Soon I intended to prove it. What began as a ridiculous notice about my dock was about to escalate into a full-blown water war. And as much as I hate conflict, I wasn't backing down. Not from Karen, not from anyone. Because if she believed she could take my dock, she had another thing coming. Let us know where you're watching from today. And if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. The first shot in this war didn't come from Karen's mouth, though she never wasted one. No, it came as a neatly folded page shoved into my mailbox, tucked inside a bright yellow envelope stamped with the HOA's ugly logo. I remember holding it, coffee steaming beside me, and already feeling my blood pressure climbed a notch. Nothing good ever came in envelopes that color. Inside was the notice: unauthorized dock structure, not in line with community standards. Must be removed within 30 days or fines will follow. Removed? I almost spit my coffee. That dock was built legally, with county permits and full inspections. I had every document neatly filed in a folder in my desk. Compliance wasn't the issue here, control was. And I knew exactly whose fingerprints were smeared all over this. At the bottom was Karen's signature, scrawled like a victory banner. HOA President. Big bold letters. She might as well have signed it Her Royal Majesty. I walked down to the dock that morning, letter in hand, staring at the boards like they'd suddenly been charged with a crime. Sunlight glimmered on the water, and a couple ducks waddled by as if laughing at me. Unauthorized structure, I muttered. Tell that to the inspector who signed off last year. But I wasn't about to storm into Karen's yard-waving permits. That's exactly what she wanted, for me to lose my cool and play her game. So I folded the letter, slid it back in an envelope, tucked it in my pocket, and decided to wait. Of course, Karen didn't. That very afternoon, she came marching down in her oversized sun hat like she was Grand Marshal of a parade. Her boat, polished to a shine, bobbed smugly at the edge of her dock. She stopped right at the property line, hands on her hips. "Jack," she said with that condescending head tilt. "I trust you received my notice." I nodded. "I did." "Then you understand the seriousness of the violation." I almost laughed. "Karen, this dock is county approved. Signed, sealed, inspected. If you got a problem, take it up with the state." Her lips curved into that smug smile, the one that said she thought she already had me beat. "Oh, Jack, HOA standards are higher than the county's. We can't just have people tossing together projects. Property values are at stake." I glanced at her boat, worth more than most homes in the neighborhood. Yeah, I'm sure the neighbors are losing sleep over my 2x4s. She ignored the jab, sliding her clipboard out like a sheriff drawing a revolver. "You have 30 days. After that, fines begin. And if I refuse?" Her smile didn't flicker. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." She spun on her heels, shoes clicking against the boards, and strode off like she was leading troops in a battle. That was the spark. The moment I realized this had nothing to do with rules or wood or permits. This was Karen flexing her muscles, proving to the neighborhood she was in charge, and using me as her example. The days after, tension simmered. Every morning I walked to the dock with my coffee, half expecting to see it spray-painted with violation in red. Karen cruised past in her boat, sunglasses flashing, waving like a queen to her subjects, except when her eyes locked on mine. Then the wave dropped. I tried diplomacy first. At the next HOA meeting, I brought my folder of permits, slid them across the table, and calmly explained the dock was legal. Karen didn't even glance at them. She tapped her pen against the clipboard and said, "Legal doesn't always mean compliant with community standards." That's when I knew reason was useless. Karen wasn't after facts. She wanted submission. She wanted me to bow, maybe even thank her for gracing me with her time. And that wasn't happening. What really burned was the whisper campaign. I caught her leaning close to neighbors at the mailboxes, pointing toward my house when she thought I wasn't looking. I knew what she was saying. Unsafe dock, hurting property values. Jack doesn't follow rules. Petty, childish lies. But the seeds landed. Soon I noticed neighbors looking at me differently. Not hostile, just wary. Like I'd become the neighborhood troublemaker. The last straw came one evening when I headed down to fish. Karen's boat was parked so close I could have tapped it with my rod. I tied on a lure, but when I cast, the line snagged on her rails. I gave it a sharp tug and muttered under my breath. I swear I heard her laughter drifting from her porch. That was the moment irritation hardened into resolve. This wasn't about a dock anymore. It was about standing up to a bully. Karen thought she could rattle me with fines and letters, but she had no idea who she was messing with. I'd weathered bigger storms. If she wanted a fight, she'd get one. The spark had been lit, and sparks ignored become fires. If the first violation letter was her warning shot, the next was a full artillery barrage. She wasted no time. By the following week, my mailbox was a dumping ground for HOA notices. Monday, failure to maintain dock aesthetics. Tuesday, improper lawn edging. Wednesday, unapproved outdoor furniture. By Thursday, I half expected one accusing me of breathing too loud near the water. Every envelope bore Karen's signature, her smug flourish like a dagger. Fines started piling up, $1.50 here, $75 there, $100 for repeats. I stacked them on my desk, wondering if she thought burying me under paperwork would work the way it had with others. But here's the thing about bullies. When you don't flinch, they double down. Karen escalated. She turned her boat into a weapon, a floating throne circling the lake like a shark, always accidentally blocking my dock more than once. I stood at the edge, rod in hand, unable to launch my kayak without scraping her hull. One Saturday morning, I walked down ready to fish, only to find her boat practically hugging my dock. I called up to her porch where she sipped a mimosa. "Karen, mind giving me some space?" She didn't blink, just raised her glass. "It's a community lake, Jack. Don't like it? Take it up with the HOA. Her laughter cut across the water like nails on glass. And she didn't stop there. A few days later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into my drive. My stomach dropped, but the deputy explained they'd had an anonymous tip about an unsafe dock. He gave a quick once-over, even bounced on the boards, then shrugged. "Jack, this dock's sturdier than most county bridges. Sorry to waste your time. Someone clearly has too much of their own." I didn't have to ask who someone was. The neighborhood split into camps. Some whispered encouragement when Karen wasn't around. Others avoided me, afraid of her wrath. And then there were her loyal subjects, nodding at meetings, parroting her lines about protecting property values. It felt like a bad high school play, except the drama queen was pushing 50 and armed with official stationery. The tipping point came at the next HOA meeting. Karen strutted in, clipboard raised like a royal scepter. I sat in back, sipping coffee from a thermos, waiting to see what fresh nonsense she'd cooked up. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began at the podium, "we cannot allow one homeowner's disregard for the rules to drag down our entire community. Mr. Jack's dock, while technically permitted by the county, fails to meet HOA standards. It is unsafe, unsightly, and frankly a hazard to property values." I nearly choked on my coffee. Unstable. Ugly. That dock was straighter than her eyeliner on a stormy day. Karen pushed forward, flashing photos like she was presenting evidence before a judge. As president, I have no choice but to enforce the bylaws. Unless Mr. Jack removes this dock immediately, we'll fine him daily and take legal action. I could feel every gaze in the room shift to me. Some sympathetic, some curious, most just glad they weren't the target. Calmly, I rose and walked to the front. "Karen, with respect, this dock was permitted legally. Here's the county approval, signed and dated. The HOA doesn't outrank state law." Her smile grew. "The HOA expands on state law, Jack. We set higher standards. Standards you failed to meet." The room hummed with murmurs. She had a knack for twisting words, sounding like the voice of reason. I leaned close, dropping my tone so only she heard. You're not protecting property values, Karen. You're guarding your pride. For a moment, her smile cracked. Then she straightened, tapped her clipboard with her pen, and declared, "Meeting adjourned." Neighbors trickled out, whispering among themselves. I stayed, gathering my papers. Karen lingered at the doorway, eyes sharp as blades. "You've got until the weekend, Jack," she hissed. "After that, I'll handle it myself." That wasn't just a warning. It was war. That night, sitting on my dock watching the sun melt into the horizon, I felt the pressure building. Karen wasn't stopping. She'd push until either I caved or she did. But me? I don't break easily. If she wanted a battle, she'd get one. And she had no idea how much fire she'd just sparked. Here's the thing about people like Karen. They never think someone's watching them as closely as they watch everyone else. She was too busy nitpicking my grass height and measuring my dock boards to notice her own fortress was crumbling. It began with a suspicion. After that HOA meeting, when she nearly foamed at the mouth, I dug out the bylaws binder. Every HOA has one. A bloated stack of rules written in stiff legal jargon, meant to keep members in line. Most neighbors never crack it open. They just pay dues, mow lawns, and hope they stay off the Queen's radar. But me? I had time and motivation. I scanned the sections on docks, boats, and shoreline use. At first, the words blurred. Then one line snagged me. All watercraft must be registered with the HOA and state authorities. Unauthorized docking or storage of unregistered vessels is prohibited. Unregistered? No way. Karen wouldn't let her boat slip through the cracks. She was the type to laminate grocery receipts. Still, the thought nagged. So the next morning, I went to the county clerk's office. The place was beige and buzzing with fluorescent lights, clerks shuffling papers like robots. I handed over Karen's address and asked if her boat registration was on record. The clerk tapped keys, frowned, then shook her head. No record under that name. My eyebrows shot up. You're certain? She swiveled the monitor toward me. Positive. If it exists, it's not registered here. I walked out grinning, so wide strangers probably thought I'd hit the jackpot. In a way I had, but I wasn't done. I flipped further through the bylaws. There was again. Dock extensions must be pre-approved by the board. Karen's dock wasn't just extended. It was practically a pier, complete with a seating nook she used for weekend gatherings. Yet I'd never seen approval in any board minutes. I checked. I combed through 5 years of records. Her name never appeared. Not once. It was almost too perfect. The cherry on top came from Bob, my neighbor. Bob's a quiet guy, not one to stir trouble, but that evening he shuffled over while I was fixing a fishing reel. "Jack," he muttered low, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Karen's been tying her boat on HOA property. That bit of shoreline isn't hers. It belongs to the association. Technically, it's against the rules." I nearly dropped the reel. "You're serious?" He nodded. "Dead serious. She pushes everyone else around, so nobody speaks up. But the bylaws are clear. You can't use HOA land for personal storage." It was like dominoes falling. Every piece snapped into place. Karen wasn't just a hypocrite. She was buried in violations. Unregistered boat, unauthorized dock, illegal use of HOA land. Everything she accused me of, she was guilty of herself. For days, I kept digging. I snapped photos of her dock extension with measurements, captured shots of her boat tied illegally, even logged the times it blocked my access, bumping my dock like a drunk at a barbecue. I organized it all, time-stamped and cataloged like I was prepping for trial. And the more evidence I stacked, the calmer I grew. Karen's power had always come from fear. Her weapon was intimidation. But now, I had the bigger stick. I'll never forget one afternoon. I sat on my dock with the evidence binder beside me when Karen strutted past, oversized sunglasses, fire-red lipstick, clipboard in hand. She smirked and called out, "Enjoy your dock while you can, Jack. Time's running out." I raised my coffee, smiling. "Hope your boat's registered, Karen." The flicker in her face, a crack in her armor, was priceless. She recovered quickly, snapping back, "Don't you worry about my boat." Then she spun on her heel and stomped off. But I'd seen it. That tiny twitch where the Queen realized her crown might slip. That night, flipping through the evidence again, I felt the tide turning. For weeks, I'd been on defense, dodging fines and false charges. But now, I wasn't defending anymore. I was preparing to strike. Her empire wasn't solid. It was built on rotting wood and missing paperwork. I was about to kick the first plank loose. But just when I thought I'd scored a victory, Karen proved she wasn't about to surrender. No, she doubled down. Bullies always do when they feel control slipping. It started with a final notice. Not mailed. Not slipped in my box. Hand-delivered. Jammed between the slats of my front porch. Big, bold letters across the top. Final notice of eviction of dock structure. Eviction. As if my dock were a squatter trespassing on the shoreline. The letter demanded immediate removal. No grace period. Threatening daily fines until full compliance. At the bottom sat Karen's signature, with a new add-on, enforcement pending. She wanted me to believe she was judge, jury, and sheriff rolled into one. I laughed out loud reading it, but still, that word eviction stuck heavy in my chest. She wasn't just attacking wood and nails anymore. She was trying to frighten me into thinking I could actually lose the home I'd worked for. The next blow came as a surprise HOA meeting. Flyers slapped on every mailbox announcing an emergency session to address non-compliance threats to property values. We all knew what that meant. It wasn't about the issues. It was about me. I arrived early, evidence binder tucked under my arm, and took a seat near the back. The room hummed. Neighbors clustered in low conversations, some glancing my way, others avoiding my eyes. You could feel gossip crackling like static. Karen swept in like a commanding officer, wearing a red blazer that screamed either authority or panic. Clipboard in hand, she strode to the front and cleared her throat. "Thank you for coming on short notice," she began, voice smooth and controlled. "We're here to address a serious, ongoing violation that threatens the integrity of our community. One homeowner has repeatedly ignored our rules, undermined standards, and jeopardized property values." Every head turned toward me. Karen soaked it up, waving photos of my dock like exhibits in a trial. Unsafe construction, unauthorized additions, substandard materials. "This dock is not only a hazard," she intoned. "It's a disgrace to our neighborhood." I clamped my jaw but stayed seated. "Let her dig." Karen leaned in, eyes bright with righteous fury. "We cannot allow this. If one person flouts rules, chaos follows. Today a dock, tomorrow chain link fences, abandoned cars, or wild parties. Is that what you want?" A few of her followers applauded, others squirmed. Then she slammed the papers down. "I propose we authorize immediate legal action to force removal." The room split. Some murmured agreement. Others objected. Old Bob spoke up from the back. "Karen, that dock's sturdier than half the bridges around here. Jack hasn't done anything wrong." Karen cut him off with a look. "This isn't about one dock, Bob. It's about order. Without rules, there's nothing." My cue. I stood slowly, binder in hand, and walked forward. "Funny you mention rules, Karen," I said, voice even, "because I've been reading them closely." Her smile twitched, but stayed syrupy. "Jack, this isn't your time." "No, I think it is." The room settled. I opened the binder, flipping to tab pages. The bylaws require all watercraft to be registered with the HOA and county. I checked. Your boat doesn't appear in the county records. Gasps rippled. Karen's face hardened. I kept going. And dock extensions require board approval. I went through 5 years of minutes. No approval for your extension. Not once. Her cheeks flamed to match the blazer. "That's irrelevant. We're not discussing my dock." "Oh, but we are," I said. "Rules apply to everyone, right? Or is there one set for you and another for the rest of us?" The room buzzed louder. Faces that applauded earlier leaned in with new interest. Karen tried to spin it, raising her voice. "Don't be fooled. This is a distraction. The issue is Jack's dock." I leaned close enough that she had to lean in too. "No, Karen. The issue is hypocrisy. And I'm not the only one who's noticed." For the first time since I'd known her, she looked rattled, eyes darting like a cornered animal. Still she snarled. "You think you can outmaneuver me? I've been HOA president for 6 years. Lawsuits, complaints, disputes. I've handled them all. You're one man with papers. You won't win. I closed the binder with a soft thud. Maybe, or maybe I've been building more than a dock this whole time. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Neighbors shouting, Karen storming out, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. Walking home under the cool night, I felt the balance shift. She wasn't invincible anymore, and she knew it. I knew it. She'd thrown her hardest punch, but the knockout was already being set. That night, I spread the binder across my kitchen table, cold coffee at my elbow. Weeks of petty harassment had me on the ropes, but the tide had turned. I wasn't only defending, I was preparing an offense. And honestly, I'd laid plenty of foundations in my life, but none felt as satisfying as this one. First up, airtight legal backup. Karen loved to sling terms like non-compliance and eviction like spells, but real law doesn't bow to HOA theatrics. The next morning, I walked into the office of Marcy, a sharp property attorney. She listened as I paged through bylaws and the stack of violation letters Karen had dumped on me. At the mention of the unregistered boat, Marcy raised an eyebrow. She's been threatening you with fines while she's the one in violation, she said. That's not just hypocritical, it's actionable. Music to my ears. Marcy helped me craft a legal brief. Photos, county records, HOA minutes, and Bob's quiet testimony about Karen using HOA shoreline for her boat. She pointed out that HOA rules allowed for immediate impoundment of unregistered watercraft. You mean? I started, a grin sneaking on. Yes, Marcy said. If it's unregistered, the HOA can request enforcement, impoundment. Turn her own weapon against her. The idea hit like a bolt. For months, Karen had threatened to take my dock. Within the rules she worshipped, I could take away her boat. The irony was delicious. But first I needed allies. Karen's power came from intimidation, making people feel alone against her clipboard army. If I could rally the quiet majority, her influence would crumble. So I started talking. Over coffee with the Martins, while helping Bob with the grill, even at the bait shop, I brought up the unregistered boat, the unauthorized extension, and the misuse of HOA land. At first, folks were cautious. Karen had ruled through fear for years, but when they saw the proof, something shifted. The fear on their faces slowly melted into something else. Relief. Heads began to bob in agreement. About damn time someone stood up to her, Bob muttered. Last year she came after me because my bird feeder wasn't the approved type. The Martin spoke up too. She made us repaint the shutters twice because she didn't like the shade of blue. It was like a dam bursting. Every neighbor had a story to tell. Karen's stranglehold on the community had stretched much longer than I knew, and it turned out folks were starving for someone to finally put her in check. Meanwhile, I kept stacking evidence. Photos of her dock extension, clearly over the limit. Screenshots from the county website proving her boat wasn't even registered. Copies of HOA minutes showing no record of her projects ever being approved. Page after page went into the binder until it looked less like paperwork and more like a prosecutor's exhibit. And I'll admit, it was satisfying. But the crowning touch came when I reached out to a marine towing company. Yes, they exist. With Marcy's help, I filed every bit of paperwork through the county and under the HOA's own enforcement rules. All official, stamped, and binding. Karen had no clue. While she scribbled up new violation notices, I was busy drafting her downfall. Still, I couldn't afford to gloat. Timing was everything. I had to strike when she was at peak arrogance, when her guard was down. Nothing topples a tyrant faster than humiliation in front of their audience. So I set the stage. The upcoming HOA meeting was the perfect battleground. I knew she'd use it to hammer her eviction threats one last time. My plan? Sit back, let her strut and rant, and then calmly unload the truth. The tow company would be on standby, paperwork in hand, ready for a single phone call. Her prize boat would be hauled away right in front of the neighbors she had spent years trying to impress. In the evenings, I'd sit on my dock with the binder beside me, watching her patrol the street with her clipboard. She'd stroll past, sunglasses glinting, smirking as if she'd already won. She never realized every step she took brought her closer to the snare I'd set. One night, Bob ambled over with a beer. "You really think this'll work, Jack?" he asked. I glanced at Karen's boat gleaming under her porch lights like a trophy. "Oh, it'll work," I said. "She built her throne out of rotten wood." I'm just giving it a shove. The weekend before the meeting, Karen swung by, lips curled into a victorious grin. Enjoy that dock while you can, Jack. Next week, it's gone. I raised my mug and smiled. Funny, Karen. I was about to say the same about your boat. She blinked, laughed it off, convinced I was bluffing. That's the thing about dictators. They can't picture a world where they're not in control. But that world was about to arrive. I had the evidence. I had neighbors. I had the law on my side. At that meeting, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to topple her throne for good. She thought I was trapped. But the truth was, she was the one standing in the snare, and I was the one holding the rope. The night of the meeting, I got there early. Too early. The hall smelled faintly of coffee, rows of chairs neatly lined, lights half dimmed. I slid into my usual seat along the wall, binder tucked tight against my arm like a weapon ready to fire. Tonight wasn't about defense, it was about ending this. Neighbors drifted in slowly, finding seats, whispering. A few sent nods or half smiles my way. Word had spread, something was about to happen. And then she arrived. Right on schedule. Karen marched down the aisle in a crisp navy suit, heels striking the floor like a drumbeat of arrogance. Clipboard clutched, lips painted bright as a warning flare. Her eyes swept the room until they landed on me. That smug grin spread across her face, sharp and sure. Jack, she purred loudly enough for all to hear. Hope you came prepared tonight. I smiled back. Always. She had no idea how ready I was. She opened with her trademark theatrics, tapping the mic, clearing her throat, launching into a speech about community standards and dangerous violations. Within minutes, she was brandishing my name, dripping with false concern. We cannot allow Mr. Jack's dock to remain. It's unsafe, non-compliant, and frankly an eyesore on our beautiful shoreline. I've given him ample time to fix this, but he refuses. Tonight, I propose legal action to remove it. Her loyalists clapped. Others shifted uncomfortably. I stayed silent, binder balanced on my lap, waiting. Karen held up skewed photos of my dock, angled to look crooked, as if the neighborhood was one step away from collapse. This is what happens when rules are ignored, she declared. Do we want chaos? Nothing but showmanship. When she finally paused for breath, I stood, steady calm. You're right, Karen, I said, voice cutting through the room. Rules do matter, and they apply to everyone, don't they? Murmurs rippled. She narrowed her eyes. Of course they do. That's why we're here. I walked to the front, flipping open the binder slowly, deliberately. Then maybe you can explain these. I held up the first photo, her dock extension. 5 years of board minutes. Not a single approval. Violation. Gasps. Heads turned. Karen stiffened. I kept going. In your boat. No county registration. No HOA registration. Another violation. The crowd stirred, voices rising. Karen flushed red, but I pressed on. And here, I said, raising another photo, your boat tied up on HOA land. Personal property stored illegally. Direct violation of bylaws you enforce on everyone else. The room erupted. Neighbors muttering, pointing, shaking their heads. Karen slammed her clipboard, shouting over the noise. This is irrelevant. A distraction. It's completely relevant, I said evenly. You've spent months threatening me, ridiculing me, pretending to uphold rules, while breaking more of them than anyone here. You claim to protect property values, but all you've protected is yourself. For the first time, her confidence faltered. Her voice wavered, eyes darting to allies who now looked far less loyal. And then came the knock on the door. 2 men stepped inside, clipboards in hand, caps pulled low. Excuse us, one said. We're here for the boat impound. The room froze. Karen bolted upright, pale. What? No, you can't do this. She rushed forward. 2 men filled the doorway, blocking her path. That boat is mine. Karen screeched. You have no authority. The taller one calmly lifted a clipboard. Unregistered vessel, ma'am. Filed under HOA enforcement. We're just here to do our job. She spun toward me, eyes blazing. You did this. I lifted my coffee mug. Yes, I brought one, and took a slow sip. You're the one who said rules matter, Karen. I'm just making sure they apply across the board. Everyone trailed after the men as they headed toward the shoreline. Karen stumbled behind them, her heels sinking into the grass as her voice pitched higher and higher. You can't take it. This is theft. Do you even know who I am? The irony was perfect. She'd threatened my dock for months, and now, in front of the entire neighborhood, her pride and joy, her shiny symbol of control, was being dragged away like junk. Some laughed outright. Others just shook their heads. Even Bob muttered about time. Karen begged, screamed, even threw herself in front of the tow truck, but it was useless. The straps were secured, the hitch locked, and her boat rolled out of the neighborhood as she stumbled after it, mascara streaked, voice cracking. I watched from my dock, sipping the last of my coffee. She tried to evict me. I murmured to myself. But tonight, it's her boat that's homeless. Neighbors clapped me on the back, congratulating me. The so-called queen had been dethroned, and the kingdom finally breathed free. Yet deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a dock or a boat. It was about showing that bullies only have power if you let yourself fear them. And I was done being afraid. The morning after her meltdown felt different. For the first time in months, I stood on my dock with a cup of coffee and felt no shadow hovering over me. No shrill commands. No smug boat parked like a guard dog. Just sunlight stretching across the lake and the water lapping at the boards. Word traveled quickly. By midweek, everyone had heard about Karen's boat being towed. Neighbors whispered like it was juicy gossip, while others spoke as if I'd slain a dragon. Bob stopped by with 2 beers, handed me one, and grinned. Jack, I've lived here 20 years. Never seen anything like it. You didn't just win, you knocked her crown clean off. I chuckled, taking a sip. She did most of that herself. I just gave a nudge. And it wasn't only Bob. People I barely knew thanked me. The Martins brought a pie, saying they could finally hang their wind chimes without fearing a violation. Another family admitted she once fined them for having too many potted plants. The neighborhood felt lighter, like a storm cloud had lifted. Karen, of course, didn't bow out quietly. For weeks, she stomped around, filing appeals, writing letters, even calling emergency meetings no one bothered to attend. Her voice no longer carried weight. Without her boat, without the aura of untouchability, she was just another cranky neighbor shouting at the wind. Eventually, the board grew tired of her antics and called for a no-confidence vote. It was almost laughable how fast it went down. Former allies suddenly found backbones. The motion passed, and just like that, she was out. No longer president. No longer queen. Just a resident with her own stack of violations. I later heard she tried to fight in court, but the law was clear. You can't twist rules forever. Eventually they snapped back. By summer's end, her boat was still impounded, her dock flagged for demolition, and her reputation in shreds. Me? Life went back to what I wanted all along. Peace. I rebuilt part of my dock, reinforcing it carefully, not out of necessity, but out of pride. Evenings found me fishing, watching sunsets gild the lake, grandkids laughing with their feet in the water, or simply me and the frogs enjoying the quiet. Now and then, I'd see Karen shuffle past. No clipboard, no swagger. Neighbors who once cowered now barely looked her way. Power fades fast when people realize it was never real to begin with. Looking back, I don't revel in her ruin, not entirely. What I celebrate is the lesson: bullies don't win forever. Their power feeds on silence, and silence only lasts until someone pushes back. Karen tried to strip away what I loved. Instead, she lost what she prized most, not only her boat, but her grip on the community. I didn't just keep my dock. I reclaimed my peace. If this ordeal taught me anything, it's that bullies thrive on fear, but fear evaporates once you call their bluff. Strength doesn't always come from shouting the loudest. Sometimes it comes from patience, preparation, and knowing the rules better than the tyrant abusing them. So here's my message to anyone listening. Don't let a bully, whether it's a neighbor, a boss, or anyone, convince you you're powerless. You've got more strength than you think. Sometimes it's just a matter of standing firm, even if your knees shake. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with a bully in your neighborhood, workplace, or life? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments. And if you enjoyed this roller coaster of HOA drama, be sure to like, subscribe, and stick around. You won't want to miss what's next.